Boker Tov, good morning everyone, right here in Yerushalayim, and to everyone around the world. Thank you for joining us. It is a great honor to learn with you Perek Kuf Yutet, chapter 119, in our new course of Tehillim according to the teachings of Chassidut. And we are going to begin with the second section of the chapter, which is the next 8 verses. But over here, each verse begins with the letter Bet. So let's look inside in your Tehillim in chapter 119, verse 9. David HaMelech begins with a question. Bameh yizakeh na'aret archo. How can a youth make his path meritorious? And he answers the question, Lishmor kidvarecha. By observing your message. It seems to be a very straightforward verse. How can a young person keep to the way of Hashem? By following Hashem's word, which basically means to learn Torah, do mitzvot, which sounds very nice and basic. So firstly, I'd like to share with you what the simple meaning of this verse is. Bameh yizakeh na'aret archo. How can a person purify his way? In other words, in the first verse of this chapter, David HaMelech said, Ashrei tmimei darech haholchim b'torat Hashem. Fortunate are those that are sincere in his way, which go in the Torah of Hashem. In other words, we have the concept of derech, the way, and orach in our pasuk is also considered a way. Derech is more of a general way. Think of it as being a main street. And orach is also a way, but it's almost like a side street. So derech is a way that a person runs their life. We should go in the way of Hashem. Orach gets more into the details. Now, in general, a person wants to know what's the right path. What's the correct way? So even if a person doesn't know the details, but everyone can understand that you need to have the Torah of Hashem to light up our way. But then it's possible for a person to also involve their own understanding, their own emotion through Hashem lighting up a person's way. You can pretty much go on a straight path. But when it comes to orach, when it comes to turning off into a little pathway, you need to have much more light in order to find your way. You need to know the details of what exactly Hashem wants. Not only that we have to keep Shabbos, for example, but how to keep Shabbos. There must be many details on how we can follow along and we can do the mitzvahs properly with the do and the don'ts, the do's and the don'ts. And so too by many other mitzvahs. We need Hashem's guidance in every single detail. And that's exactly what David HaMelech says over here. Bameh yizakeh nar et archo. How can a youth, a young person, it also applies to an elderly person, but for sure it applies to a young person. How can a person light up? Yizakeh, milashon zakut. Zach means clear. So the idea of yizakeh, how can a person clarify, light up their own way in the details? Lishmor kidvarecha. To guard and to look at every single detail of your words, Hashem. Davar. This is how we allude to the concept of the mitzvot or the Torah. In this verse, it's kidvarecha, as your words. One of the commentaries explain over here, one of the commentators explain that over here, David HaMelech is acting as a humble person. He's considering himself to be a nar, even though he's already an adult, a mature person. But he's not only asking about another party being a nar, But he himself is referring to himself humbly as being a youth. And the truth is that that the previous Rebbe used to have a slogan, or at least he said it to someone. He said that your age doesn't go by your passport, or it doesn't only go by your passport. It's really important to know that a person of an elderly age, quote unquote, that acts youthful, their mind is in the right place, and they keep on initiating, they keep on working, they keep on plowing away and working at Hashem's master plan in the world, the person is considered young. It's not just if a person is 18 or 20, the person. I know some people like to say that their age is 18 or 20. But I think it's a compliment to give your real age and say Baruch Hashem, of course. Thanking Hashem that you've reached this age and asking Hashem, Achalai, praying and wishing that we should be able for many, many more happy years and healthy years, we should be able to serve Hashem in the most active and youthful way. This is why we established a project in Chabad of Rechavia several years ago called Lev Tzair. In English, it's called Young at Heart, which we have the young people in age, like the teenagers, do joint projects together with the quote-unquote elderly, but it's where each one mutually helps the other. It's not just the young person which is going to help an elderly, but each one helps the other. And Bezrat Hashem, now we are re-energizing this amazing project, which is good for both. It's beneficial both for the youth, which gives the youth meaning in their lives, and it also gives the elderly people, quote unquote, things to look forward to and to do different projects together and do different things together. And Baruch Hashem, we're going to be, we've already started to re-energize this project. And the truth is that when the Rebbe instituted the Lubavitch Youth Organization in 1956, there were some elderly Chassidim that thought that maybe they're not involved and they didn't understand why the Rebbe wasn't including them in the Lubavitch Youth Organization, which is the outreach branch of Chabad. And the Rebbe said, I wasn't at all excluding anyone. There's no question that the young people in age, teenagers, 20s, 30s, they have a lot of energy and they're ready to turn over the world and to bring so much godliness to the world. On the other hand, we have the people that are already in an advanced age, which have so much experience and knowledge that if we bridge the two, if we make a partnership between the young at age and the youth in spirit, we can have a complete unit of such a successful project that together they can really accomplish a lot in the world. So it's not necessarily derogatory is the wrong word, but it's not like an embarrassing word that David the Melech is being humble, is considering himself only a youth. I think it's a great thing that whatever age he was when he wrote this chapter in the Tehillim, he's considering himself young. And he's asking Hashem, I have so much more to accomplish. Please guide me. Now this leads me into another point over here in this very, very enlightening verse. David HaMelech says, Bameh yizaken na'ar et orcho. King David realizes and understands that the time to shape a child, the time to shape a person is when someone is young. Without putting a specific age number to this, but when a person is young, and the younger a person is, that is really the time to educate them. And that's why David the Melech almost asks on behalf of all the youth, please Hashem, guide me, give me the details, connect me to your Torah, lishmor kidvarecha, to be able to keep your mitzvahs as you wish, as your words, as your Torah. We know a similar verse that states, Chanoch lanar al pi darko, educate nar, same word, same Hebrew word, nar, a youth, a child, al pi darko, according to his way, gam ki azkin lo yasor mimenu, even when he gets old, lo yasor, he will not go away from it. In other words, when you have a tree, and you want the tree to go in the right direction, to grow in the right direction, nice and tall. So if it's already a tree which has already been around for a long time and it's already crooked, it's going to be a big challenge to get it to grow straight. That's why when they plant new trees, they put 2 sticks on the side with some kind of string to tie it, and that makes the tree grow straight. The same thing is when educating a child. You want to give a child Torah, you want to give a child direction and spirituality, now is the time. Like the story or the tale or the joke goes, that the mother comes to the rabbi with a little baby, 1 month old, and she says to him, Rabbi, when should I start educating my child? And he says to her, you're 1 month late. Educating a child, there's nothing like teaching a child, even when the child is so young. And we know the Yiddish songs that mothers always would sing lullabies to the child when the child is going to sleep. And saying Moda'ani with the child, yes, even 1 day old. I believe a child is very aware of what's happening, even when they're so young. We think they're unaware because we interpret the wording of aware that a person is responsive, the person communicates with you. So we think that if a baby doesn't communicate, then they don't know what's happening. But I believe that a child knows everything that's happening. The Rebbe would say that that a child is like a sponge. And a sponge, when you fill it up with water, you cannot tell that there's anything inside. It looks like the same sponge that it was before you filled it up with water. All you have to do is to squeeze it, and the water comes pouring out. So too, a child, we have to fill it up with water. Don't stop. And even listening to Jewish songs, nigunim, Chassidic nigunim, saying words of Torah, the 12 Torah passages that the Rebbe asked that the children should say, saying words of Tanya, holy words of the Torah, has a very positive effect long-term on the child. And that's why it's so important to invest a lot of time, even if we don't think that the child is taking anything in. Doesn't matter. Now is the time. Now is the time to give a child as much as possible. Now, don't think that a child only means at the age of 1 year old or 5 or 6 or before bar mitzvah. Chinuch, education, there is a halachic discussion whether chinuch before the age of bar and bat mitzvah is a biblical mitzvah or not. On one hand, it's not a biblical mitzvah because the child doesn't have any obligation yet to do the mitzvahs. On the other hand, if you don't educate the child now, by the time they're 12 bat mitzvah or 13 bat mitzvah, a bar mitzvah, then they're not going to know what to do. So it's almost as if, biblically speaking, you have to educate the child before the age of bar and bat mitzvah in order that they should know what to do after that age. But there's a very interesting Talmud in Tractate Kiddushin, page 30, right at the top. Talmud says as follows: what is the age of chinuch, of education? Now that doesn't mean that other ages are not appropriate to do chinuch. I think it's just trying to emphasize this specific age, as we'll see in a second, what chinuch is about, how powerful it can be. If I remember correctly, one opinion is from age 16 to 22, And the other opinion is from 18 to 24. Now that obviously chinuch education applies also when you're 1 day old and 1 year old and 10 and so on. But sometimes people think that when a child is already in their teenage years or in their 20s, they're ready on their own. Don't tell them what to do. You don't know how they're going to respond if you tell them what to do. Here you have a clear Gemara. The Talmud tells us that you can have such a positive impact on your child or on a child that you know, that you can even at this age, you can have, this is the age of chinuch. It's almost like the joke that they say, I wish I had all my life's problems when I was a teenager, when I knew all the answers. But even if they think they know all the answers, and you might think that it's very, very touchy, when do I say something? How do I say something? You have to try. And I always tell parents, you have to say, you have an obligation, obviously in the right way, but you have to suggest. Just because you're afraid what the response is going to be, and sometimes it might be harsh, that doesn't exempt you of teaching, of educating. A child is a child is a child at whatever age they are. And we have to project positivity. We have to try to influence them, in children, quote unquote children, in a positive way. Nar doesn't only mean a little child. Nar means youth. Youth today, the teens, 20s, 30s is also considered the youth. Right here in Rechavia, we have quote unquote students, hundreds and perhaps thousands of students. Every building has a few, almost every building has a few apartments with students. Who are these students? Between ages 20 and 40, after they finish the army and they start deciding what they're going to do in life. So whether in different universities over here or in colleges, they come right over here to central Jerusalem, right here in Rechavia Nachlaot. We have a special shliach, Rabbi and Mrs. Zeira, which do amazing work with these students. So the age of nar, of a youth, quote unquote, is very general. Today, Baruch Hashem, you have people in their 70s, 80s, even 90s. Just yesterday, we celebrated our dear friend Walter Bingham's 97th birthday. Baruch Hashem, he just recently, within the last year or two, received an award from the Guinness World Records that he is the oldest living reporter, media person that's active, Baruch Hashem. He has waltersworld.com. He has an Arutz Sheva weekly program. Baruch Hashem, he's an inspiration for me. Every time I see him, every time I think of him. And if you didn't call him yet to wish him Mazel Tov, happy birthday, please call him today. Because this is an inspiration for all of us for many happy years, that it doesn't matter what age it says in your passport. It matters how much life you're full of and how active you are, and try to work and try to initiate and try to plan. You're also called na'ar. If you think that you're in that age group, you should know that you're also na'ar, you're also youthful. And therefore, you have an obligation to develop that and have an obligation to ask Hashem that Hashem should guide you. Because at whatever age we are, there's always room to grow. There's always room to learn. And this is the prayer and the tefillah, the bakasha, that David the Melech asks Hashem, the more we learn, the more we know, and that shapes us straight for many happy years to come. And that's exactly why it says in the pasuk in Parshat Kitavo, Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, for man is like the tree of the field. Just like a tree, there's so many comparisons between a tree and a human being. The fruit that a tree gives off, the energy, the oxygen, and also the fact that we want to keep it straight. When a child is young, the younger a child is, the more receptive they are, and the more we want to try to guide them in the in the right direction, in the right way. And this is also why a child, the younger they are, we try to give them more Jewish education. In other words, some people would argue, let's educate the child with secular studies. They need to know math and science and everything else. And learn Torah later on when they'll be in their teens, to go to yeshiva. That's not that important. No. It's more important to teach a child Torah when they're really young and before Bar and Bat Mitzvah, either the majority of the day or the entire day. Today, if a person wants to have an occupation, it's much easier to take a crash course on the internet for a few months or a few years, and you can catch up easily to learn the profession that you want to do. Let alone the fact that I believe they say a huge percentage, I think 80% of the youth that go to college and university, they don't end up majoring. They don't end up and they don't end up in the career that they majored in while they were in university. So I'm not going to say that they wasted their time totally, but there's no question that if they would invest more time in learning Torah, that's what's most important. That's really what shapes us. And that's why it's important the earlier on, the younger we are, the more important it is that we invest our time in learning Torah. And this is exactly why when it comes to Bikurim, for example, when another comparison to the tree of the field, that the first fruit that are even unripe yet, that come out, that blossom, we tie a red ribbon around it, and these are the Bikurim, the gifts that we bring to Hashem. What does it mean, bringing to Hashem? It's not just a technical act of bringing a basket of new fruit to Hashem. It's telling Hashem that these are the first fruits. The beginning is what I dedicate, what I give to Hashem. So the younger a child is, the younger a person is, the more appropriate it is to invest in them, to give them as much Torah and spirituality as possible. And that's why in the beginning of the day, when you look at a full, let's say 16, 18-hour period from when we wake up till we go to sleep, it's important that in the beginning of the day, when we're most fresh, we're most ripe, quote unquote, we should learn and daven and give it the best because we are most awake, we are most fresh. And that is the best gift to Hashem. When we give a gift to Hashem, we don't give like, oh, when I'm falling asleep, I'll try to open a couple of books and try to learn some Torah. No, when I'm most youthful, when I'm most fresh in the day itself, I've just woken up and I feel great. That's when you want to learn your half hour or hour of Torah a day or several hours of Torah. Because the more to the beginning it is, the better, the more energy we have, and the better the service of Hashem will be. So we've learned, just before we finish today's class, I want to share with you a beautiful story. It's actually a double story, and that will be the conclusion of this first verse of the letter Bet. The Alter Rebbe was married for 14 years without children, and he came to his Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezrich, the Maggid, the holy Maggid of Mezrich, and he asked him for a bracha. And the Maggid quoted this verse. He said, you want to have a bracha for children? You should have guests. This is what the Maggid received from the Baal Shem Tov. How do you see that in this verse? Bameh, it's a little bit play on words. First, I wanted to give you the most literal and deep interpretation. Now it's a nice story from the Baal Shem Tov. Bameh yezake nar. How will a person, bameh, with what? Yezake, can a person have a zechut? Nar, to have a child. Et orcho. Remember yesterday we learned et means with. Et orcho, with, through having an oreach. A little bit of a different interpretation, but it's the same root word. Aleph resh chet, oreach, a guest. The more you bring in guests to your home, that will be a segula, a bracha, a blessing for you to have children. That's exactly what he did. I'm sure he had guests before then, but he brought more and more guests. They put a big focus on that. And but a year later, I believe, the Mittler Rebbe, the first son, the oldest child of the Alter Rebbe, was born. For us, I think even though now it's difficult, we're not allowed to bring over guests because of the pandemic, I still think it's important to focus on guests like in the Shabbos video that we made several weeks ago for Parshat Vayera about Achnasat Orchim, that there are different ways to have guests. You can call people before Shabbos. You can bring food over to people's homes if they allow. And even a bowl of soup, hot soup, to make people feel that maybe they don't have hot food. That is such a beautiful gift to share. And there are different original ways of bringing over guests or being connected to guests. And that leads me to one more story of the Baal Shem Tov himself. This is the Baal Shem Tov's teaching. Bameh yizak kenar et orcho. That's how the Baal Shem Tov himself was born. His parents, Eliezer and Sarah, the Baal Shem Tov's parents, didn't have children, unfortunately, for many years. And they were known to have many, many guests on Shabbos. So one Shabbat, they had a full table of guests, and everyone had a lot of food, and it was a beautiful Shabbos energy. In comes in a guest who didn't look very Torah observant. He came in with all of his backpacks, seemingly that he had traveled on Shabbos in a public domain. So it really didn't fit with a Shabbos atmosphere. And people started looking at him. There was a lot of poor people didn't have place to eat, so they were looking at him. They were all observant, but they thought, what do you mean? What's this guy doing here? What's his connection to Shabbat? But as soon as Eliezer saw him walk in the door, he gave him a big hug and said, my dear friend, please come inside, put your things down, let me give you a Shabbos meal. Didn't ask him any questions, didn't judge him, just welcomed him in beautifully. And he gave him a full meal, and he gave him a place to sleep for that night. Didn't want him to go and travel on Shabbos. And I believe it was towards the end of Shabbos, this strange guest turned to Eliezer and Sarah and said to them, you should know that I am Eliyahu Hanavi. I am Elijah the prophet who has come down to this world embodied in a body in order to give you a test, to see if your achnasat orchim, if your welcoming guests was authentic or not. And you passed the test. You didn't judge me. You welcomed me in, and you gave me a real Shabbos experience. And on high, it was decided that just like you brought light to my life and to so many people around here in your home, that Hashem is going to give you a son very soon who is going to be the light of the entire world. And how true that was, that Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem Tov, Yisroel, was born a short while later. And Rabbi Yisroel Baal Shem Tov, the holy Rebbe, the founder of Chassidus, brought so much light, the light of Chassidus, which this is the subject of our class, and so many countless other classes that are around the world and today online as well, and continue to give inspiration to people. And the Baal Shem Tov's light continues to enlighten our lives and the lives of so many people, and that's the purpose of light. The light is that we shouldn't only remain alone, not only to keep it for ourselves, but to enlighten others, to bring light to the rest of the world, especially us in Chabad of Rechavia, that we are in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is called Oro Shel Olam, the light of the entire world. Thank you so much for joining us. Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow we're going to continue the next pasuk of the letter Bet. All the best.